Colorado's record COVID hospitalizations spike again. Denver's goal to eliminate traffic deaths isn't even causing them to drop. This is supposed to be a great time to be a worker in America. Employers need you. They're offering new benefits. Let's look at what that means for unions and striking workers. Denver puts up new signs warning of constant homeless sweeps. And this isn't a waste of a parking spot. It's equality. Next. There will be no criminal charges for the Arvada police officer who mistook a Good Samaritan for a mass shooter and killed Johnny Hurley in Old Town. Hurley's mother today asked people to channel their anger into action to make the world a better place. There's no indication that officers ever interacted with Hurley before one of them shot and killed Hurley on June 21st. Hurley had just used his own handgun to take out a shooter who ambushed and killed Arvada police officer Gordon Beasley. Prosecutors said today that the police arriving on scene spotted Hurley holding the original gunman's rifle and thought that he was the mass shooter. Hurley's mother, Kathleen Boland, put out a statement at roughly the same time, reading in part, quote, "Consider using Johnny's commitment to doing the right thing, even at the greatest cost, to inspire your own actions." If you had any remaining doubt about the efficacy of COVID vaccines, take a peek inside Colorado's hospitals. The unvaccinated are a minority of the state's population now, but 78% of hospitalized COVID patients in UC Health facilities are unvaccinated, and 90% of patients in ICU beds or on ventilators are unvaccinated. UC Health's breakdown aligns with what we know about the statewide picture, as about 25 Coloradans are dying each day of COVID. Hospitalizations jumped by another 100 patients over the weekend, and they're unlikely to crest in the next 2 weeks, and we know that because case numbers are also rising. We are headed for a peak that could surpass last winter's, the worst of the pandemic. And we're approaching this troubling point in the test positivity rate because our 7-day average is 9.9%. That is almost double the rate at which the virus is considered in check. She got about 5.8 million Coloradans, and we know at this point at least 3.9 million of them have at least one dose of the vaccine. You'll notice that gray slice that represents kids too young to get vaccinated has now shrunk as kids 5 to 11 are currently eligible. Denver's Vision Zero project is the big idea that the city should strive for zero traffic deaths in an effort to reduce them as much as humanly possible. But Denver's not even moving in the right direction. 73 people have been killed on Denver streets this year. It is a record since Vision Zero started in 2017. Our Steve Steger looks at how we've ended up here.
Whenever you ask how realistic the goal is, zero traffic deaths by 2030, you get the same response.
It wouldn't make sense to have any other goal.
The mayor announced that goal, Vision Zero, in 2016, after one of the deadliest years on the city's roadways in recent memory. 61 people died on Denver's roads in 2016. 3 of the 5 years since have seen even more traffic deaths. The 73 we've seen so far this year, the most since Denver committed to Vision Zero.
Certainly, we're not moving in the right direction to meeting our goals of zero fatalities on our streets.
The city admits the numbers don't look good, though Jennifer Hillhouse, the city's director of transportation planning, contends the changes they are making are working.
Where we are making investment, we're seeing a positive impact. So we know what we're doing is making a difference. It's just how do we get it more done more quickly.
She points to parts of East Colfax.
So those are the post and paint that you see out there working to narrow the road from a visual standpoint, to reduce speeding and also enhance crossing distance.
And that's now one of the safer parts of Colfax. We haven't seen nearly the number of serious crashes.
Jill Locantori leads the Denver Streets Partnership, an advocacy group for pedestrians and cyclists.
And it just shows we are not doing nearly enough to prevent these tragedies from happening.
She agrees the changes are making a difference, but says it's all moving too slowly.
Those are proven strategies. The problem is we're not just doing them fast enough or widespread enough across the city to actually be making a difference.
Hillhouse says her department is looking to scale up the work they do to meet the goal of zero deaths, a goal that seems tougher to achieve with each passing year.
How can we make a bigger impact in a faster way, more efficiently?
For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
Other large cities across the country are also seeing increases in traffic deaths while they too aim for this goal of zero. Hoboken, New Jersey, interestingly, about the same size as Parker or Littleton, they have found success with this, but they went hard at it. Hoboken redesigned its roads a few years ago, and at last check, had not seen a traffic death in 3 years. Workers for HelloFresh are voting on unionizing their workplace in Colorado. HelloFresh is one of those companies that mails out pre-prepared meal kits. If you're hearing more about unions and striking workers these days, it's because of a resurgence in the labor movement as the economy reshuffles as a result of the pandemic. Our Luis De Leon takes a closer look.
It's at this warehouse in Aurora where HelloFresh employees like Noah CANADY make sure food gets to your doorstep, especially during the pandemic.
People are ordering these boxes more than ever, and it makes sense. Like, we're keeping people safe.
But the return, he says, just isn't enough for the job they do.
And I want to start a family someday, and I can't with my current wages.
And that's why he's on the committee to get himself and his co-workers unionized. It'll come down to a vote. If approved, they'll become members of the local Unite Here chapter, which typically represents food service workers among other industries.
And that's one of the most frustrating things is my story isn't unique.
It's happening at a time where seemingly more groups of workers backed by their union are going on strike, like the janitorial staff at DIA and workers at Nabisco in Aurora. There have been 287 strikes across the country this year, just 3 in Colorado. According to the Pew Research Center, the number of people in unions in the U.S. has been nearly cut in half since 1983. But a Gallup poll this fall found that out of 1,000 people surveyed, 68% of them approve of labor unions.
There are workers who are realizing they have opportunities that they weren't previously familiar with, and they're taking advantage of those opportunities.
Jeffrey Zaks, a professor of economics at CU Boulder, says the amount of strikes and unions forming is not nearly where it was years ago, in part because working conditions improved over the years. But he acknowledges that the pandemic has demanded more from workers because of labor shortages.
That is, employers are being faced with labor market conditions that they're not familiar with, and they're finding that the employment strategies that they have typically used aren't working anymore.
Zaks doesn't think the overall trend of unionization will go back to what it was, say, in the 1950s.
There may be some marginal change in the increase in the amount of unionization we see, but this is not going to reverse the overall trend.
As for HelloFresh, a spokesperson said they announced that they would raise hourly wages for all workers last month. But CANADY still believes that a union would make sure that they could at least fight for increased wages to stay.
What our union does and what we're going to fight for is make sure that's a contract, but they can't just take it away later, and also fight for more.
Now, employees at HelloFresh have until November 22nd to mail in their ballot. They need to get more than half of the votes in favor of a union for it to go through. Now, Kyle, even though employers have made it really harder over the last few years to unionize, Professor Zaks, who you heard from there, says some employers have, generally speaking, seen unionization pay for itself when wages are raised because it creates more efficiency. To the extent that efficiency actually happens, consumers won't really feel the impacts, like prices increasing on certain products.
What have we seen in Colorado specifically?
Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in Colorado, the number of workers saying that they are in unions have been increasing between 2010 and 2018. Last few years, we saw that number dip just 7.4% in the state as of 2020.
And you were saying that one of the reasons for that is because workers are able to get what they want without having to unionize.
Exactly, but the point is still, in the case of HelloFresh, for example, they're still wanting to unionize right now, at least wanting the chance to vote to decide whether or not to, so they can have a fighting chance to keep those benefits, to keep those wages raised.
Really interesting. Luis De Leon, great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
So Denver is required by law to provide notice of its upcoming homeless camp sweeps. There are new signs in 5 Points that say that the sweeps are going to be happening regularly from here on out. City says this is the second area that's under constant notice of coming sweeps. Credit to Westward for spotting these signs first. So the city has marked off an area that's bounded by Broadway to the west, Park to the north, Welton to the east, 20th to the south. That triangle is now going to have sweeps 3 times a week. History suggests it'll just drive the people who are living on the streets there out into other neighborhoods. There's another regularly swept area with similar signs near Samaritan House. So Denver's required by court order to give at least 48 hours notice before it sweeps homeless camps, and at least 7 days notice for larger scale encampments. The city says that these regular sweeps that they're posting with the signs are legal because they're considered different from the larger cleanups. Talked to the advocates at Denver Homeless Out Loud, who said this is just a way for the city to get around the rules and try and push people further from downtown.
Since they pushed all of those folks away from the rescue mission and Samaritan House, Well, they moved a couple blocks over, and so now they're trying to push them out further again. So that's how I see what's going on, is they have a development plan, and poor people in the middle of the city is not part of it.
So we've seen how this works. Denver will do something, somebody will sue, judge will decide it. Those are the new rules going forward. Denver Homeless Out Loud is suing the city over prior sweeps and told us today it does not have plans to take these new signs and regular sweeps to court as well. So we love highlighting innovative ideas to some of Colorado's persistent problems, though it's even more fun when we can actually do something about it together. Last week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign raised more than $15,000 for a nonprofit pilot program that fights addiction in our community. Advocates for Recovery has embedded a peer recovery counselor in an emergency room, somebody who can sit down with a patient who comes in with a drug or alcohol issue and speak from their own personal experience to offer some off-ramps from addiction. Your generosity is going to help that nonprofit continue its life-saving work. And coming up on Wednesday, I'll unveil our next Word of Thanks idea, just in time for Veterans Day. Investigators have some questions for the CU scholar who drew up a plan to overthrow the election results. And we meet teachers intent on having students learn about an uncomfortable aspect of Colorado history.
I think there are always so many different voices that don't get heard.
We'll hear theirs next. Just because we don't talk about something doesn't mean it didn't happen. Two teachers who felt that Colorado schools didn't talk enough about the Sand Creek Massacre of 150 years ago decided to do something about that. Our Nelson Garcia has that story.
The Colorado we know today is a summation of our past, but there are splinters people don't always like to talk about, according to Dan YERGERT.
Well, I think it gives you a more complete picture of the West.
And his twin brother Jake.
I don't think it's biased to amplify other people's voices.
Later called the Sand Creek Massacre, the U.S. Army attacked a Native American camp in southern Colorado, killing 230 people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, in November of 1864.
It shocked me that we had never really talked about that in history class. Why didn't we hear about this, especially in Colorado, so close? Why does that seem to be the thing that gets forgotten?
So the brothers created this.
Hi, I'm Dan. And I'm Jake, and we're both public high school teachers.
Though they're both English teachers, they created a history lesson in the form of a 35-minute YouTube video.
The Sand Creek Massacre is a tragedy that we need to talk about.
To make sure it's not ignored.
When we started, we promised ourselves we probably weren't going to say anything in the videos that we wouldn't feel sufficiently comfortable, confident that this is the truth, that we wouldn't say it in our classrooms. All we're doing is shining a spotlight. I don't think we're picking a fight or we're going biased in any direction.
But in a larger sense, the villain of this story is the Civil War era United States.
The twins say they're not trying to disparage America or Colorado.
But I feel like you don't gain anything by selectively examining history.
They want everyone to know history is history, good or bad.
We're just trying to tell a good story, a true story, a story that needs a signal boost.
Even and especially 157 years later. For Next, I'm Nelson Garcia.
After doing 6 months of research, Dan and Jake said they next showed their findings to the historians at the Sand Creek National Historic Site to make sure that what they'd found was accurate. Investigators would like a word with the CU scholar who gave the Trump team the roadmap on how to steal the election. John Eastman now faces a congressional subpoena. And almost a week out after Election Day, a Republican wave looks less wavy now that more votes have been counted in Aurora. Next. Aurora saw a bit less of a Republican wave than it seemed like on election night. Conservatives still will have a majority on city council with the mayor's tiebreaker, but Democrats pulled ahead in another race there. Now, Democrats have never held a majority on Aurora City Council, and on election night, it looked like Republicans won 4 or 5 open seats. Now it's looking like 3 Republican wins and 2 Democratic wins, as Ruben Medina pulls ahead of John O'Scott in Ward 3. Now, make no mistake, still a rightward shift for Aurora and a win for Mayor Mike Kaufman. He'll now have the votes to pass a Denver-style homeless camping ban. It's just less of a Republican wave than we initially told you. The congressional committee investigating the January 6th attempted coup in Washington says that it wants to talk with the University of Colorado visiting conservative scholar, the guy who wrote the blueprint for the Trump team on how to pull it off. Law professor John Eastman's been subpoenaed by the House Select Committee that's investigating the deadly insurrection. Eastman was the visiting scholar for the Benson Center for the Study of Western Civilization at CU Boulder. The university stripped him of his public duties as a visiting scholar back in January after he spoke at President Trump's Stop the Steal rally. That was the gathering that immediately preceded the storming of the Capitol. And now Eastman's no longer affiliated with CU. Eastman had written a memo outlining a 6-step process on how Republicans could overturn the election and keep Joe Biden out of the White House. It would have required then Vice President Mike Pence to set aside the Electoral College votes of 7 states. That would have left both candidates without a majority. The election would then have been decided by the U.S. House, and each state delegation would have received 1 vote. Republicans would have had the votes to install former President Trump.
After a weekend with sunshine and record high temperatures near 80 both days, how about highs in the 40s and 50s today? All compliments of a cool front coming in as basically just a wind shift. A dry front producing only isolated snow showers in the northern mountains and a lot of wind in Wyoming. These clouds will move out over the next 2 to 3 hours. We get a sunny day tomorrow. The wind advisories do not translate into Colorado, so that's a good thing. After a mostly sunny day, the next storm system's already on the way. Clouds increasing across the western slope with rain and snow by this time tomorrow night. In Denver, calm and quiet with clearing skies. Our low 32. Tomorrow's high at 62 with lots of sunshine and high clouds. Wednesday, mountain snow. Thursday night, a 20% chance of snow here in Denver, a colder day. And then we warm right back up again, sunshine and 60s for next weekend.
The parking job alone, terrible as it may have been, would not have been enough to make it on You Crossed a Line segment. It was the bumper sticker that was just that in your feedback next. We occasionally remind drivers you've crossed a line because Colorado wouldn't need so many parking spaces if everybody took just one. Rob got us to dust off the segment with this gem from a Safeway parking lot in Denver. One of the bumper stickers reads, "Equality." And sure enough, that Subaru has taken equal amounts from 2 different spaces. Equality. The line crossing has to be really egregious or kind of hilarious to make it on air, but send us the worst you see. Email next@9news.com or use the hashtag HeyNext on Twitter. Question that came in via Twitter tonight during the program from Kramick, and this is a really good question, so I'm glad we can spend a little time on it. Where do you get the data that there are 25 deaths a day from COVID in Colorado? 7-day average for the state is 17. So in fact, if you go to the state's data dashboard and you look at the most recent 7-day average for deaths, you will see that it's 17. But we know that deaths always come in late. So if you look at that chart, it always trails off, like deaths are dropping, and then those numbers backfill over time. So the only accurate and honest way to look at it is to look back, say a week, 2 weeks, as those death reports come in. If you look back 1 week, we're at 25 deaths. Look back 2 weeks, also at 25 deaths. It's possible that they're dropping, but there's no evidence to show that that's true. We have to give you the best possible info each night. See you next time.